It seems like I stepped away from BookTube, had a baby, and came back only to read and review a ton of books about Pennsylvania. So what's up with that? Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my BookTube channel. This is going to be a sort of cozy catch-up / maybe a little bit of a Q&A / talking about where I've been and what's been going on with my reading and my life. So if you're new here, hi, my name is Anna. I use any pronouns. I read a lot of queer lit, disability lit, eclectic nonfiction, sci-fi fantasy. My tastes are kind of all over the place. And I've been on a brief hiatus from BookTube because I actually just gave birth to my first child just over 3 months ago. I'm doing well, she's doing well. Our policy as a family is that we're not really going to share a ton of details about her online because we want to protect her privacy, but also because we want her to be able to engage with the internet when she's really old enough to understand what that means. But I will say she's amazing and perfect and wonderful. I love her so much. We have had such a fun time getting into reading books and playing games, and she's very into rattles at the moment and being aware of like animals. It's super awesome. So yeah, we're doing great. It's definitely been a huge adjustment, probably the biggest change that has ever happened to me on every level. Physically, emotionally, in terms of my daily activities. I can actually hear her crying since I'm filming that while she's napping right now. So hold that thought. Of course, having a child has really affected my reading, but I have still managed to find some time to read here and there. I've been doing a lot of rereads. I've been keeping up with reading for my book club, and I was recently able to complete a buddy read that I did with Sue Jackson in February for Black History Month. Together we read The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. Now, James McBride is a favorite author in our household, and I have a goal to read all of his books. Sean and I actually purchased this back when it came out. We were still living in Seattle at the time. As you can see, we got it from Elliott Bay Book Company, and much to my dismay, it has taken me this long to read it, but it is a book that I thoroughly enjoyed. This is a book about the neighborhood of Chicken Hill, which is in this place called like Pottstown. Is it Pottstown or Pottsville? It's Pottstown. Okay, sorry, but my brain is just, short-term memory is basically all devoted to keeping a small child alive. Pottstown, Pennsylvania, right. So it is about this Chicken Hill neighborhood, which is a neighborhood of like mixed African Americans, but also recent immigrants to the United States, immigrants who have maybe not like assimilated into white culture as much. So there's a lot of Jewish immigrants who speak a variety of different languages and some Italians as well. And this follows the sort of adventures of a bunch of different people who live in that neighborhood. James McBride has such a way of writing that reminds me of listening to jazz music. He's actually a jazz musician too, but if you read his books out loud, there's such a fun, like musical improvisational quality to the words that he chooses. It gives a certain texture to the scenes that goes beyond just the words that he chooses, but specifically like the rhythm of the words that he chooses also makes the voices of each of his characters so unique. One thing that I really loved about this book, and I'm not going to give away too many details of the plot because I really do think like it's worth reading for the sake of the plot, but a lot of the plot like revolves around the conflict between these different groups and between the more like white supremacist elements of the town itself. But one of the things that I think that this book does really well is its examination of what it means to create these in or out groups, this us versus them, how that is so frequently a feature of American life, even though America claims to be a welcoming melting pot that just welcomes everybody. Anybody can come here and make a better life. And this book kind of talks about brushing up against the limits of what that really means. To give an example, there are a lot of different groups of Jewish immigrants that to the sort of outside world who are not Jewish all really appear as this one monolith, like all the Jews. They're all the same. They're all the same to many of the people in the Black community, the white community, etc. But within that group, the Jews themselves have a lot of like really different and distinct identities. You have the Polish-speaking socialists. You have the ones who speak Yiddish that don't really want to assimilate. You have the ones who speak German that really do want to assimilate. You have the ones that come to America thinking it's a land of promise and opportunity and think, actually, you know what? I don't like it here. I don't like lots of things about here. I'm going back to Europe. So this book really troubles a lot of the traditional, like, Ellis Island, the streets are paved with gold, I came to this country and had a better life types of narratives that we see around immigration, particularly at the like end of the 19th, early 20th century. And this takes place in like roughly the 1930s, and then some different events happen in the 70s as well. So I thought that was great. I think that this book also has a lot of really good writing to say about disability, which I did not realize going into it, that this was going to be a book as much about disability as it is. So there's a lot of characters in this that are either born with disabilities or acquire them. Hannah, who is the owner of the titular Heaven and Earth grocery store, has a limp from contracting polio as a child. There's another character who is also physically disabled, who's more of a villain. And then there is a young boy, Dodo is what he's called, who is deaf. He's deafened as a child because he's in an accident. And as is the case during this time period, there's a lot of like pushing for him to be institutionalized because of his disability, but also because he's Black, and the sort of institutions that exist to ostensibly care for people with disabilities are really more just part of like an incarceration. They're essentially prisons where people are warehoused away because they are disabled or because they are otherwise considered like troublesome and undesirable to society. There's a lot of disability solidarity across racial lines and across class lines to an extent, but part of what I also really like about this book is where it shows that solidarity that you would think exists within the group breaking down. And frequently it does break down along different like axes of privilege. It reminds me so much of the creation of like disability to white, which is a hashtag that I believe was created by Vilissa Thompson, who is a Black disabled activist. And I remember listening to her episode of Disability Visibility, where she was interviewed by Alice Wong, and they talk a lot about this so-called like hierarchy of disability, where depending on your access to other privileged identities, your disability might not be viewed as such a bad thing or an undesirable thing. They talk about how for white men, acquiring a disability because you served in a war is seen as not so undesirable or terrible as somebody that is born with a disability, or how some people don't see physically disabled people as those who have intellectual or developmental disabilities. And this book really engages with that in such a meaningful way that I almost never see in fiction. I see it a lot more in nonfiction. I see people spell that out specifically and about like the difficulties of disability organizing when the group can also be so fractured along these other lines. But this book has some really beautiful instances of disability solidarity and has a disabled villain that doesn't fall into a lot of the pitfalls, the tropes, the stereotypes of the disabled villain. That is part of his character, and it's not an insignificant part of his character, but he's not evil because he's disabled, and both he and the more heroic characters are drawn as fully complex individuals, which I really loved. I would definitely recommend reading this book. Obviously, I'm going to recommend all of James McBride's books because I love them so much. I think this is only the third one I've read. I read Deacon King Kong a couple years ago and loved it. It's like a top favorite for me. And I actually read The Good Lord Bird when it came out. That was my first James McBride. honestly, I don't think I appreciated how good it was back then when I read it. I enjoyed it, I liked it and recommended it, but I need to go back and give it a reread just because I have more life experience and context under my belt than I did when I first read it. So if you've read any of James McBride, please let me know. Also, thank you so much to Sue for the buddy read that we did. We did our buddy read via Voxer, and we sort of made our way through various challenges in our personal life schedules that made it difficult for us to keep up with reading, but we got through it. We had a wonderful discussion. Sue, I'm happy to buddy read with you anytime. So at this point in the video, you are probably going to see a Q&A if I am able to actually get any questions. So we will go ahead and transition to that now. Right, so hello. It is a few days later from when I last filmed the beginning part of this video. I asked for your questions both on my YouTube community page and over on Instagram, so I'm going to answer the YouTube questions first and then the ones from Instagram. So I heard from Jenny Fern Books, how have I been generally, what have I been reading, and have I picked up any new interests recently? Generally, I've been doing pretty well. I'm feeling pretty exhausted, as you might expect. My daughter is now about 3.5 months old, so I think we've gotten out of the sort of immediate trenches of the newborn sleepless nights, and we've gotten through 2 major growth spurts pretty well already. But you just sleep a lot less than you normally do when you have a new baby, and I think the way I've been describing it to people in my personal life is that this is like a full contact sport, and probably next to the next most difficult thing I have ever done to becoming a parent, like giving birth, having a kid, was when I was training to run half marathons. And that just seems like infinitely easier than this. So I feel like I'm coping with it pretty well, but it's definitely been a huge adjustment. It is the biggest change, both physically, mentally, emotionally, that I have ever gone through in my life. So, it's been good though. It's been really awesome getting to watch my child grow up and seeing how much she's changed and grown in this relatively short period of time. What I've been reading, I haven't kept up too much with the pace that I typically read, but she and I have been reading a lot of books together. Me, her, and my husband are all doing a little 1,000 books before kindergarten thing that our public library does. It's just to get kids under the age of 5 interested in books and reading. So we've read a lot of board books. We listened to the audiobook series of The Wild Robot, and we listened to The Hobbit, narrated by Andy Serkis. So I'd say in terms of quantity and volume, most of what I've been reading has been stuff that I've read with my daughter. However, I am working on a video right now about a nonfiction book that I read and loved called American Sirens. It's about the history of the ambulance in the United States. And I have a couple books that I have been reading for my book club. So we are currently reading Yellowface by R.F. Kuang for the fiction book club. This is a reread for me. I will probably make a video at some point discussing my thoughts about this a little bit more in depth, but I do have them. And then my nonfiction book club, we also had an author event. The author came and spoke to the book club, and the book that he wrote is called Something Between Us: The Everyday Walls of American Life and How to Take Them Down by AnnaG Pandian. I didn't actually finish the book in time for the book club meeting. I got about halfway through and just wasn't able to get it done in time, but I am still continuing with reading it pretty slowly. And because I have been, in general, just needing to read something that is a little bit more relaxing at night before I go to bed, I started this book called The Healing Season of Pottery by Yeon So Min and translated from Korean by Claire Richards. This is a story about a woman who is a career lady. She's a journalist. Her name is Jung Min. She decides to leave her job as a TV journalist and is kind of aimless in her life, but she stumbles accidentally into a pottery studio near where she lives. I'm very early on in the book, but at this point she's starting to go to the studio to learn how to make pottery and just get to know the people there. This is supposed to be really amazing. It seemed like it would be a really cozy and like comforting read about friendship. I like to read books about that kind of thing. Have I picked up any new interests recently? Outside of just baby related stuff, I don't think so. I mean, that's a big like new interest, obviously, and like my schedule has completely changed and the sort of daily and weekly rhythms have shifted to be a lot more focused on having a really young child. But at least for myself, I don't think I've picked up any new interests. I have had the return of some seasonal interests, however. So because it's spring where I live, I have been enjoying working on the seed starts for my garden, growing a lot of flowers and veggies this year, getting my bird feeders set out and ready to go for like our birds that are returning to their nests and whatnot. And then what was the other one that I was thinking of? I can't remember. I'm completely blanking on it now. Oh yes, I remember now. It was April being National Poetry Month in the United States. I am participating again in the April Daily Poem event. This is a free event that a group called Storytelling Collective puts on. I participated in it, I think back in 2022 or 21 was the first year I did it. I don't remember. But their book, Collective Verses, is where my poetry was first published, and I am participating in it again this year. So technically not any like new interests, but the return of old favorites. Colleen Cosplay asks, any books in your to-be-read pile that you're really excited to get to reading? Any new book releases you're looking forward to? So yes, I got quite a few books for Christmas and for various like holidays, birthday, etc. from Sean and from my family members that I'm really excited to get to. One of them is called The Subversive Stitch, and it is a nonfiction book that's a history of embroidery, mending, sewing, textile arts, that kind of thing. I've been kind of interested in that ever since I read Women's Work, The First 20,000 Years. I loved that book. I'm also really excited to be keeping up with the Witch Hat Atelier manga series. That's been one that I have been reading for years now at this point, and I think the 14th volume is the most recent one that just came out. I did pre-order it, and I am super excited to read that. I haven't really decided what my next book pick from the books that I was gifted for Christmas and my birthday is going to be, but there are also a lot of like weird or bizarre sci-fi and fantasy books, so I'm sure you'll be hearing about them on the channel at some point. But those are probably the ones that I am most looking forward to reading next. Starry Nights at the End of the World asks, what is a book that you find uplifting and encouraging in these dark times? All right, I've got that one for you. I've been reading Owls and Other Fantasies, which is a poetry and essay collection by the late, great Mary Oliver. I started reading this book actually with my daughter. We had to go back to the hospital where she was born a couple of times just for some emergent medical things that we had to deal with her. And because I'm me, I kind of grabbed the closest book to me when I was packing to go back to the hospital, and this is what it happened to be. And I just read these poems to her and also to myself, because the mere act, I think, of reading poetry out loud is just like good to ground yourself back in your own body when you're scared or stressed, you know, when the dog bites, when the bee stings, that sort of thing. But these are just such gentle but profoundly honest poems about birds and nature. I wouldn't say that they all have like happy endings, but they do make me feel happy to read them because they situate me in the place that I think Mary Oliver was so much inhabiting as she was writing these poems. These are the kind of things that bring me hope and bring me joy, both in like darker times for our world and in difficult times for myself personally, or difficult situations. Owning My Story asks, how have you incorporated reading back into parenthood life? Um, very carefully. I would say I still read almost every day for myself. We read every day, you know, with my daughter as well. And so like that's something that has been a huge part of it, as I said earlier. But as far as like reading for myself goes, I still try to read every day. I read almost every day, I would say. I'd say that the biggest change has just been that because I don't get as much read in terms of quantity as I'm used to, mostly because I just have a lot less free time during the day, and my free time at night, it has dwindled to the point where I don't get to read as much before bed as I used to. That like the main way that I have incorporated reading back into my parenting life has been to be really judicious about whether I'm sticking with a book or not. So before I had my daughter, there was definitely a lot more time to sample books more widely just because, or to stick with books that, you know, I wasn't enjoying as much or wasn't getting very much out of, because I had the time to do it and the freedom to sort of take a chance on that. That is not really the stage of life that I'm in right now, and I know that's a definite for now. I'm still picking out books that are really eclectic, but I'm just narrowing my like criteria, I guess, for sticking with a book a little bit more. I'm also having to be a little bit more judicious in terms of event participation, buddy read participation. I see lots of stuff going on BookTube that I would love to be a part of, but realistically, given the speed and the volume I'm able to read at currently, I just have to like participate in fewer things and just say no more, which is, it's challenging for me. It's tough for me to say no to things. I'm traditionally a person that's like, no, I can do all of it. I can take all of it on. But right now, I just want to make sure that when I'm reading, I'm able to actually take the time to enjoy what I am reading instead of stressing about numbers or keeping up with commitments that I've made. And his Dork Materials asks, what most excites you about returning to BookTube? Welcome back, by the way. Those of you on BookTube will know that's Allie of A Genteel Black Hole. Thank you so much for the welcome back. It's good to be back. I think what most excites me is just honestly getting to make some more dedicated review videos again. I think that at this stage in my life, like I said, because I am reading fewer books overall, I am still interested in doing like a monthly wrap up. But given that I'm like being more judicious when it comes to, am I going to stick with a book that I have started? I think it'll be fun to make some more dedicated review videos. It's so funny that like I went from saying I don't do these really at all because nobody watches them to I actually have a lot of fun making them. So I'm making them, regardless of how many people watch them or not. Another thing I am really excited about for returning to BookTube is a video that you probably won't see for a little while yet after this one gets posted, because it's taking me a really long time to script, film, edit, the works. But I am in the process of writing and filming a retrospective of my 8 years on BookTube. Just some trends and observations about that time, going through and like revisiting what were the hot books or the it books that I read that year and are they still my favorites, reflecting on the video topics that I chose, on indie bookstores that I visited or that had an impact on me that year. And it's been a really long drawn out process, again also because I can kind of only work on scripting this when my daughter is either napping or my husband's able to come help out with her if she, you know, gets fussy or needs something like that. So it's definitely like finding the balancing act of the time to do that, because right now I am at home with her full time. But yeah, that is what I am most excited about. I think like, especially, I did not plan this, obviously, because I was working on this so much farther back, but I have suddenly seen a bunch of videos about people reflecting on BookTube and the idea of BookTube as a community. Is it dying? Is it not? Nick from Dr. Cranky Pants Reads just made an amazing video about this, about like quitting BookTube and like why does returning after a long absence require a public explanation. it was so funny because a lot of what he said mirrors what I'm working on in this script, and then also some things that I said in videos that I posted 3 or 4 years ago. So that's going to be fun to sort of incorporate into that script and like actually be a part of that conversation. Who knows when this video is actually going to wind up going up, but I guess the one upside of constantly wondering if BookTube is dying or if it's even right for me anymore is that that conversation is always going to be relevant. So thank you everybody who sent in questions. I really appreciate all of y'all's thoughtfulness and for sticking with me as I've been taking this time to spend with my husband and with our new baby. I don't know when you will next see a video from me because, like I said, I am kind of snatching time to film, edit, write, etc. when my daughter is sleeping, or, you know, when her dad can be there with her and I get a little bit more focused time. But rest assured, I have some stuff in the pipeline, and I really appreciate getting to watch all of your videos, read your comments, answer your questions. Thank you, as always, so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!